Happy Friday Eve to you. We got a long weekend for those of you who don't have to work on Monday. Kudos to you. Oh my gosh. I am just catching up on my news feeds, and you guys know who follow this stream that this is a random live stream. I never plan my live streams, I just pop on whenever there is something that I find interesting. I have a very suppressed live stream. So obviously, the demons don't want people to engage in my content. But if you miss this live stream or this discussion, you are welcome to catch it on the replay. It's interesting. I'm kind of looking at all these little things, these conversations that are going on, all the manipulations that are being revealed, in this America, if you will. You know, it's interesting because, you grow up with this bipartisan, you know, dynamic, right? You got the Democrats, you got the Republicans, and both sides are trying to narrate themselves with some kind of virtue that appeals to the regular person's sensibilities, idealisms, belief systems. That's pretty much what these political parties do. And, all while they're doing that, they have people who truly believe in this idea of what they stand for. So when you look at, the Republican Party, for example, you know, you'll hear, their mantra as being God, faith, and family. These are things that they claim, many of these people who represent Republicans claim that these are things that they stand for, right? And then you have the Democratic Party who, oh, we care about family, but all the while they, do little slick things to inspire people not to want to have them or to destroy their legacies, all kinds, or not even just want to start them. They're very slick in their little propaganda of people, too. And, you know, it's interesting with these Epstein files because I've been saying this about the Epstein files that you cannot play politics with how you are looking at how these Epstein files were even put on our radar, the suppression of them, right? Because the Democrats had this information, right? They had this information and they were sitting on it, right? Because a lot of their people and a lot of the people they know would have been exposed. And I'm pretty sure that they, their business connections were like, do whatever you can politically to keep this on the hush, right? But then the Republicans ran on. I mean, they ran hard on the Epstein files, right? And so I was expecting for the Epstein files to be released immediately almost after the Trump, administration got into office because they ran on that, right? But then there was a lot of tiptoeing and, pea-footing around on getting these files released. Now, this is in the power of the Republicans to do this, right? And yet they basically have to be sued to release this information about a so called dead child predator, right? And it's just to me just revealing a lot about this two-party system in America, that neither one of them are more virtuous than the other one at all. They're manipulating people into believing that at best, and poor people for believing it, right? Because when you look at how this Epstein stuff went down, right? The one thing a reasonable person who actually cares about children will, conclude is that both of those parties are guilty of protecting people who prey on children. If you are a halfway decent person, that is going to be your conclusion. that we have people in our government who are so power hungry and sick in their mind and probably groomed. They were probably groomed because I'm looking at a photo. Somebody showed me a picture of a photo that appeared to be a significantly younger version of Pam Bondi with Donald Trump. And I'm not sure if that photo was AI. I didn't really do the research to see if it was AI. And with these Epstein files, you do have to be careful because people are pushing out a lot of AI stuff. So I don't know if what that person sent to me was true, that there was a young Pam Bondi with Donald Trump at what appeared to be one of these Epstein things. You know what I mean? And if anybody can validate that photo, if you saw that photo being true too, right? Let me know. Hit a like or put it in a chat. Is that photo real? Because if that photo is real, that opens up so many other conversations about these people and even the people who are in our government, who's running our judicial system. Like, it paints a very bad picture on the judicial system if you have people who have an interest in a case like this protecting it and not revealing it to the public. That shows you how sick these people are. And again, Pam Bondi has a lot to account for. She has a lot to account for. She has a lot to account for. Because it's like, to me, she should have been very outward that she may have had connections with Donald Trump in those capacities. She should have been outward that possibly she may be linked to these files, and maybe there is a recusal that needed to happen in her decision making when it came to these files, to me, if that picture is legitimate. If that picture, let me see if that picture is circulating anywhere else. Young Pam Bondi and Trump. See, it's like, I don't know if this is real or not.
Who else wants to see Pam Bundy's face when they ask her about this picture? I really want to see her face when they ask her about this picture.
I mean, it's circulating. That picture is circulating. That picture is circulating.
That winning feeling you love? Yeah. Bring it every.
What do you guys think? Pam Bondi has a lot to answer for.
Impeachment hearings continue this week in Washington, D.C. The president has a new star player on his defense team. Former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi is joining the White House communications team to work on a proactive impeachment messaging and other special projects. But as 10 News reporter Phil Buck explains, the two have a controversial history dating back to before Trump ever jumped into the presidential race.
Well, President Trump, he knows.
So this is 6 years ago. So this is Tampa Bay News, and this is actually 6 years ago. And they're talking about Pam Bondi.
In Pam Bondi, the Tampa native and the former state AJ, she's no stranger to scandals involving both of them. So let's pick things up in September 2013. Bondi's office announces she's looking into investigating complaints against Trump University and its affiliates. 4 days later, and Justice for All, which was a political group backing Bondi's re-election campaign, they get a check for $25,000 from the nonprofit Trump Foundation. A few weeks later, well, Bondi says, she's actually not going to file suit against Trump over those Trump University complaints. Fast forward now to March 2016, a campaign rally right here in Tampa. Bondi gets up on stage and endorses Donald Trump for president. The following week, Trump representatives, they acknowledged that illegal donation. They blamed it on a series of clerical errors. And then in July, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, they file a complaint asking for an investigation into whether or not Bondi broke the law by not pursuing legal action against Trump University. A couple of months later, the Washington Post reports that the IRS fined the Trump Foundation for that illegal donation. Less than 2 weeks after that, September 13th, 2016, Crew then files criminal bribery complaints against both Trump and Bondi with the Department of Justice. So now let's fast forward another 2 years. That brings us up to 2018, December. Trump is now the president, and the Trump Foundation officially shuts down amid all of this controversy. And then we skip again ahead to just last week. On Wednesday, we start to hear reports coming out that Bondi is going to be joining the White House communications team. And then on Thursday of last week, a judge orders the president to pay $2 million for misusing his nonprofit, the Trump Foundation, to further his campaign for president. So those...
Okay. That doesn't really talk about Jeffrey Epstein there. It just talks about some donations here.
Was the president aware of Secretary Lutnick's ties to Epstein when he chose him to lead the Department of Commerce? Was he aware?
Chris Malin was a Border Patrol agent.
Okay, so I'm going to conclude that the president, in fact, did know about his ties because he was the next door neighbor.
Shame on you.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
You're
this
from
is
a tiny,
pathetic. This
beautiful
is
state.
pathetic, Mr.
City will be in
Chair.
order.
I am not asking trick questions here.
You
The
got your
American
5
people
minutes.
have a right to know the answers to this. These are senior officials in the Trump administration. This is not a game, Secretary.
I'm Attorney General.
My apologies, I couldn't tell.
Damn.
By 2000,
Like, this lady, whoever she is, she obviously are like, you are protecting some pedos here. You are protecting speaks at RNC. You are protecting some pedos here, girl. She's not looking good. She is not looking good. And if that photo, I can't see any other references to this photo beyond, like little online people. And so I don't know if that's AI or not. And so we will see. We will see if that is an AI photo of Donald Trump and Pam Bondi when she was looks like a very, very, oh, here's another one. Hang on. I mean, that is her. That is definitely her. Oh, Plant Max. That's her for sure. But is the photo real? Good Lord. Can I get somebody to validate this? I'm trying to see about a credible news outlet showing this photo. Like, you would think that all the hot news outlets would have that photo everywhere. Maybe they're suppressing it. I don't know if that photo of Pam Bondi and Trump is real or not, but if it is, it just seems like to me that Trump hired a whole bunch of people that into positions where he can control them into doing whatever they can to not release those files. And when it became a legal matter, that is when Trump, that's when they had to. I mean, Kash Patel literally lied to the public. He literally bold-faced lied to the public and said that they had nothing. We looked at ours. If it was something there, lying to the Republican base, because that's who he was really having to be accountable for. They were like, him and Dan Bongino literally told the public that there was like nothing there. Like nothing to see here, right? And when the public just didn't buy it, it really took the Democrats, because they're trying to save their asses from all that weird shit that they were doing in 2020. So they're like, Epstein is almost our saving grace, but we got to be careful, guys, right? Because some of our people are in there too. You know what I mean? Democrats right? They have to pursue this in a slick way. They have to pursue it in a slick way. So the Democrats are actually really trying to give the Republicans what they want. Because, if there's one thing they know for sure, is that Republicans, even though some of them are them, they hate pedophiles. They hate the regular Republican people, the base of Republican people, right? They are people who believe that there is no room in a civil society for these type of deviant people, right? And so the Democrats are kind of giving them what they want. Release the files, right? And so they are releasing these files, right? And Donald Trump is, I mean, honestly, I know a lot of Trump supporters are in a complicated place in their hearts right now, because it's like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's like on one side this demon is imperializing other lands, which ultimately is going to make things better for our country, right? But on the other end, you know, there's the glorification of a possible pedophile there, right? There's that inklet that this dude was not just a casual acquaintance with Epstein. And I mean, it keeps coming out. And even Melinda Gates, which I'm sorry, Melinda Gates should have never brought her ass out there talking about Epstein, right? We already knew Bill Gates was in the files, right? She already admitted that she met one time. I don't think Melinda Gates should have been out there talking about Epstein. The reason why is because there was something weird about her kind of laughing about. No, I'm just so glad. I'm just, there's nothing funny, Melinda, right? I don't understand why you're chuckling as you're trying to distance yourself from this Epstein person. And she said the only reason why she wanted to meet Epstein was because she just wanted to meet the guy. She wanted to see him. But Melinda Gates knew what the hell it was with Epstein, too. If you look at a lot of these higher elite circles, right? A lot of these people, they are saying repetitively that anybody who knew Jeffrey Epstein knew exactly what time he was on. They knew exactly what he was about, what he was doing. They may not have known all of what it was, but they knew a lot of what it was, right? And so I can't believe that anyone who even had close proximity to a person, unless Bill Gates was on some real sneaky stuff. I mean, there was some kind of allegations out there that he even gave his wife an STD. But, you know, getting in from a possible prostitute, but who knows? All I can say is that these people are Satanists. To me, any type of activity that involves the harming of children is Satanism. And it goes back to very ancient practices, cults. I posted a video. Let me go to my YouTube shorts. Jeffrey Epstein's niece has recently come out in about these revelations about her uncle. And, she's saying some really interesting things.
Epstein's niece. My family masqueraded themselves as Jewish publicly, but behind closed doors, at Passover dinners, when I was drugged, would admit, we are Satanists.
Now, why did they have to drug her at the Passover dinners? I don't understand what drugging in her particular Jewish family. Passover is a celebration of, being favored by the Most High, so that when he execute his judgments, that it will pass over those who he deem are his people. I don't understand what drugging a child and talking about your Satanism have to do with Passover. Yet here Jeffrey Epstein's niece is saying we masqueraded around as Jewish people, but my family admitted that behind closed doors we're Satanists.
As Jewish publicly, But behind closed doors, at Passover dinners, when I was drugs, would admit, we are Satanists. They told me that we belonged to the cult of Baal. Baal.
And obviously, when you go into antiquities, right? And if you follow my YouTube posts, I talk a lot about Canaanites. And recently, I've just been kind of digging into antiquities a lot more and just understanding ancient people, understanding the Bible as it relates to ancient people. And one thing that I am arguing at the moment is that you don't need a lot of people do not need a DNA test to prove their ancestry. A lot of people do not need a DNA test to prove their ancestry. And when I look at how genetics is defined for a lot of people, right? For example, there are a lot of black people, they take a DNA test, and typically they're going to get placed in Nigeria, for example, right? Benin, right? And so they get linked to Edo people, right? But you got to understand the Edo people, right? Who were they before they were these Edo people, right? And when you start looking at their features, the features of these people, how they depict themselves, you're going to start to see a reoccurring theme. Okay? And it goes back to the descendants of Noah. It goes back to the book of Genesis, the table of nations, right? And again, that is a boring part for a lot of people. But for people who are truly scholarly and who have discernment, that is a very important part to pay attention to, because it tells you how the nations of people were formed. And from there, you can kind of understand the ancestry of people from how those people in ancient times started depicting themselves. So, for example, Noah's sons, Ham, right? He had three sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, right? We know that Japheth is the father of the Eurasians, right? The Europeans, the Turks, the Slavs, the Southeast Asians, the Aboriginals. Japheth is the father of them, right? Ham is the father of the African nations plus Canaan, right? And then Shem is the father of the Arab nations plus the Israelites or the Hebrews. Okay? So let's look at biblical genetics here for a second here. We're going to only isolate the sons of Ham. One thing we know about the descendants of Ham is that from a physical standpoint, they are fixed. And so you're going to have to go to Dead Sea Scrolls, and there's a lot of people who will just try to tongue twist and trying to interpret what that scroll was saying. Dead Sea Scroll 4Q186. They'll say like, "Oh, it's a zodiac." No, it's not. And you really have to be a descendant of those people to understand what they were trying to say. The Hebrews were measuring ancestry, genetics, and even the spirit of a person by the way they looked. And what they were trying to convey to us is that for some people, some descendants of people, those looks are fixed. So I'll divert you to the post on my page so that you can see that people from Benin or Nigeria, when you kind of go back even further of who those people are, you're going to start seeing similar traits to the Nubians, because their nose, the descendants of Ham, yes, their nose do not change. Just like the Canaanites, the eagle Achilles nose, that dates back to antiquities. It will never change for those descendants unless they modify it. And so when you go back and you look at genetics from the biblical standpoint, the establishment of nations, what the people look like in antiquities, beyond migration, you can tell where people descend from. And I am going to argue that down that biblical genetics will always be tried and true, the best way to track the ancestry of at least descendants of Ham. With descendants of Japheth, it is very hard to do that with Eurasians, but you know that there are certain bloodlines that did go over into the Eurasians that created a certain look for them that did not change, especially in Germany. So, again, I look, a lot of people, this is a sensitive conversation. I have been called a racist recently because I have been kind of calling out these obvious things that genetically there are some groups of people who do not change. And because they do not change, they can dominantly change the face of races of other people. So when you get into people like the Greeks, right? The Greeks exist for, there's a couple of types of looking Greeks. You have the Canaanite looking Greek, which was Cleopatra, right? And then you have the more attractive looking Greeks as well that might have been more Edomite mix. When you start looking at how people and ancient people looked, then you kind of start playing people like a box of crayons. When you were a kid, remember they would make us mix the colors, right? And we would kind of figure out, new colors based off of that. You kind of use that logic, but you start using it with the physical features like the Hebrews, and you will always know who people are. You will always know who the Nubians are, even down to today. You will always know who the Canaanites are, their descendants, even down to today. A lot of those ancient features, and even the Hotaps, uncanny. The Hotap nose, that is a gene that passes on down to today. Hamites do not change. They are very constant in their features, and typically that core feature that stays the same for them is their nose. And so when you're reading scroll Q4186 for you archaeologist people and you scholarly people who are just so perplexed as to this secret horoscope code. It wasn't a horoscope. It was not a horoscope. Q4186 is not a horoscope. When you're talking about the feet of Taurus, you are talking about a distinctive descendant of people that they're talking about, right? And of course, they don't want to tell you who those people are because they're trying to protect false identities of people. But the Hebrews, obviously they were measuring people by the faces. The Greeks were doing it too, but the Hebrews were doing it from the lens of, in my mind, as I read that scroll, they were doing it to let us know that there are certain aspects of descendants that are fixed. And when you see them talk about the feet of Taurus, that's not a zodiac, right? That's not a zodiac. That is a nose shape, and that is the Canaanite nose shape. It is the Canaanite nose shape. And those Hebrews in Qumran, they were not Jews, and they did not care for Canaanites, and they also described these people as corrupters of faiths. And so when they're using all these code slick words in there to describe those infiltrators in Jerusalem during the time of the fall, mid-peak Persian Empire, Greek Empire, down to the Roman Empire, those Herodians, those were not their people. Those were Canaanite descendants who had basically absorbed the identity of their people with the help of their people because the tribe of Judah betrayed the 12 tribes of Israel by creating that religion they know as Judaism. So when you kind of understand the full conversations in the Bible, you will understand that that group in Qumran, those people who preserved the Dead Sea Scrolls, they weren't a stricter Jewish sect. They had nothing to do with the Jews at all. They were the pure Hebrews. The pure Hebrew faith was being practiced in Qumran because Jerusalem had been corrupted. And so when you're reading the other Dead Sea Scrolls and what they were writing as they were kind of exiling themselves in Qumran to get away from the corruption of their faith, you kind of understand a couple of things there. That towards the end, Qumran was more of a military fort, but those people were there for hundreds of years. They found pregnant people there. And so it's not until you get to the Damascus scroll that you realize that the Hebrews did preserve their bloodline and that they were scattering them while they were in Qumran. So when you get to the last rites of the Romans, there were a lot of Hebrew descendants that have been scattered. They were scattered. They were preserving their bloodlines secretly and scattering them. So by the time the Romans came to subdue that land, it was a military fort. And you kind of get the ideas of that. The Kittams are the Romans, but the Romans are also Canaanite descendants as well. A lot of them. They had military strategy in place. It was a full-blown plan of military strategy when the Romans came to cause destruction on that land. And they hid the scrolls in the caves because they knew the Romans were coming. And again, the Most High is going to preserve his word. And it took thousands of years. I mean, the Dead Sea Scrolls were not discovered, until like that collection into 1940 something, right? And so, you know, I think the God of Abraham is always going to keep his word. He's always going to keep his word preserved for honest-hearted people who are searching for wisdom. And he's always going to keep his word accessible and inspired to the real bloodlines of Israel. And, you know, shout out to the real remnants of Hebrews. And we're not talking those who call themselves Jews. We're talking the real remnants, because they are waking up and they are inspired to prophesy and dig into the scrolls in a way that their generations were not trained to do. And this is kind of the inspiration of the Most High to wake up those dry bones towards this time of the end, because there are a lot of revelations happening. And, you know, I think that if you are inspired to prophesy as you're looking at a lot of these disgusting systems in this world, they're collapsing. They are collapsing. And the United States, Israel, the second beast, right? They are basically at the end of their power in a lot of respects. You know, when you're talking about fallen empires, you know an empire is last rights when it's imperializing the hell out of everybody else. And I think, like I said, this nation is going to irritate Russia. And I do believe that because the Russians are sons of Japheth, they've been used before to execute judgment on the nations before. I do believe that the fear of Russia is really more biblical. I think the fear of Russia is more biblical than the propaganda machines would want us to believe, because they know that Russia has been used in the past. And it wasn't Russia, okay? It was Magog. And again, you look at Magog and where it's situated biblically, or where it is today, and what Magog was in the Bible. It is modern Russia. And again, people don't want to believe these things because I think it's a little too deep for them. But I look at the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? I look at the people in the days of Noah, right? These people did not believe that destruction was coming to those systems. They didn't, right? They really believed that this is just fantasy, right? And then the destruction came. Then the destruction came. And I think a lot of these so-called scholars and academic, they work very hard to prove that the Bible is not true. But all the while, as they're digging up this earth, as they're going into and finding more antiquities in the earth, they're realizing that the accounts in the Bible is not only true, it is a true, accurate description of mankind's history from ancient times up into the Roman Empire. And so, I always tell people, if you really want to understand the full Word of God, get into the Dead Sea Scrolls yourself. Don't let some clergy person dictate it to you, because what they're going to do is indoctrinate you. And as they're indoctrinating you, they're going to make you not, they're going to set up these barriers where you can't ask additional questions. You can't question the doctrine. You can't question the practices. You can't dig into the Word of God and get a newer understanding and present it and actually debate it. They don't want you to do that in these clergy spaces, because their job is to keep you indoctrinated with their creeds and their doctrines instead of you understanding the entire Word of God. It is an accurate account of mankind's history. And these accounts have been collected by human beings who were inspired to write about what was happening on the earth at their particular time. And a lot of things that were happening on the earth at their particular time are reoccurring. There's nothing new under the sun. And so, as you see the rise and fall of a lot of empires, why would Americans think that that is not a fate of America someday? Like, why wouldn't they believe that America, just like Rome in all of its glory, just like Greece in all of its glory, just like Persia in all of its glory, why would they believe, if history has said that these mighty empires that are they were way more mightier than America and they fell, why would we believe that this country would not? And that's the sad thing about people who say that they are Christians or believers, is they have the spirit of Lot's wife. A lot of so-called Christians have the spirit of Lot's wife because they've been indoctrinated to have it. They don't want to see an end of this system of man. They don't even want to believe that it's real. They want to believe that it's just a Bible story that's been passed down and it's not real, you know? And, just like Lot's wife, right? She was longing for those things behind. She did not believe that Sodom and Gomorrah was going to be destroyed. And she looked back at that system of things and she got destroyed with it. So I think with believers, keep your prayers up. Keep your prayers up, because the devil is out here deviling. There's a lot of revelations about how these devils are moving in this nation and beyond. And, you know, you just, I just tell people, keep your prayers up. Keep your prayers up. Try to be an honest hearted person. Seek wisdom, seek God, call upon his name, trust him. These are how this is a way to have peace in this chaos. It is a way to have peace in this chaos. So get into your Dead Sea Scrolls. All right? Get into those Dead Sea Scrolls. I'm going to just put this up here again. This is my compilation that I use, that I kind of dig through and study and, it's, I would say that, again, use discernment. You got to use discernment when you're kind of digging into the scrolls. And one way that I can help you to kind of discern what is being said in these scrolls that were not added into the 66 canonical, that is your Bible, one thing that I would encourage you to do is look at these scrolls as you're reading them, the messaging. You're going to read these through the lens of a Hebrew, not a Jew. If you read these scrolls through the lens of a Jew, you are not going to discern what they're saying. Because a lot of the information that's in these additional scrolls, they are against the system that has been known as Judaism. Okay? These are scrolls of these isolated Hebrews that removed themselves from the corruption of their faith. So when you're reading these additional scrolls, you cannot read them like you are reading the writings of a person calling themselves a Jew. Okay? And even the reference to Jonathan Maccabeus, right? This is, when you're reading that fragment, you got to understand that Jonathan Maccabeus appears above a line talking about war. Okay? The Maccabees were not coveted Hebrews. Okay? They weren't. Herod the Great, an Edomite, he was not a coveted Hebrew. He was a Edomite that converted to Judaism. And so when you know who people are, you'll know who they're not. Those who call themselves Jews are Canaanites, descendants. The white ones, they are Canaanite descendants. And you know they're Canaanite descendants because many of them have the ego Achilles nose that is fixed. It will never change for them. The Edomite Jews are very distinct, but they're harder to clock than the Canaanite Jew. And the only reason why the Edomite Jews are harder to clock is because they were not fixed. They are Shemites. They are like me. So the Edomites are going to look better. They're just going to look better. So, again, get into these scrolls. Understand what the Hebrews are saying. Hebrews are not Jews. Hebrews in these scrolls did not convert to Judaism. The perversion that they're talking about in these additional scrolls is Judaism. All right? The synagogue of Satan. They are not looking at that faith as favorable. They are looking at that faith as a corruption. And they were not a stricter sect of Jews. They were the original sect of faith that got corrupted by those who call themselves Jews. So when I say that Hebrews are not Jews, right? People are often like, Hebrews were Jews. Hebrews were this. No, 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 no. You got to kind of understand. Romans 11. Okay? Paul is having this conversation, right? Because he was from the 12 tribes of Judah, or 12 tribes of Israel. He was a Benjamite, right? Paul, like many of those Israelites, when they were exiled in Babylon, they created a new faith with their Canaanite exile buddies called Judaism. And it was very much woven, it was a merger between Zoroastrianism, Babylonian traditions and idealisms, and the Hebrew faith custom. They merged it. All right. And then Christianity came and became the second corruption to the Hebrew faith because they indoctrinated it. And when you go back to the raw Hebrew faith, it's not as complicated as these indoctrinated religions with their false idol images. There's no such thing as a Star of David. There is no such thing as a Star of David. And Constantine, a Canaanite descendant, a wicked Canaanite descendant, gave Christians their cross. All right? A Canaanite descendant claimed that he saw an image of the cross as he was trying to win a war and elections. And it told him to conquer with that cross. That's what the Canaanites said. And that's how the cross became a symbol of Christianity. You know, Christians, y'all really need to do y'all research. You know, and as the Bible says, get out of her, get out of her, get out of her. Babylon the Great, the world empire of false religion, right? She is a whore. False religion is a whore to government structures, and they're going to eventually bring her down. But anyways, you guys, have a wonderful rest of your evening. I'm coming up on an hour here, just looking at some of that interesting stuff. I don't even want to talk about Candace Owens and this Erica Kirk thing. Candace is not taking her foot off next, okay? Candace is not, she is, you would have, like, this is a grieving widow at this point, to me. Candace is a grieving widow, and if nobody is going to mourn Charlie Kirk and fight for him, thank God he got Candace Owens, because she is not letting up. There was a recent video that was dropped, and I guess this is super post Charlie Kirk's memorial. And not super post, but relatively close to that memorial. Erica is on the mic like she's, head honcho salesperson. They just pulled off a wicked event of the century, right? And you would think that Erica Kirk was somebody that was just part of the company, and she was in charge of organizing all that. She had no relationship to Charlie at all. The way that her voice and her tone was. Like, let me see JP. I think JP Peterson did a great job with this. And he was on point. He timed everything. Is it JP Peterson? What's the dude's name? Let me see. Here it is. He said something's off. He came out. This dude got so much backlash for doing this little sketch. And the thing is, he's a comedian. Erica's out there on the block. She's been on the block, so she's fair game now.
Try not to die as he climbed the world's tallest building, 1,600 feet. Luckily for Alex, everyone was disappointed. He lived. It's so unnerving to watch. I hate it. I told you not to show that to me again, Nigel. Like, I literally pissed.
Where you at, Jake?
Got this snowplow driver to combat ice. And this is footage of Minnesota charges red light face mask. It's no secret.
Okay, I can't find it. He did a video some weeks ago. Got a lot of backlash on it because he's basically just clocking Erica Kirk. Like, honey, why are you so excited right after your husband died? Like, that woman is suspect to me. I've always said that. I tried to give people time to grieve, but this woman has not been grieving. She's been out there grand hustling. I mean, it's like Erica Kirk wake up to the rapper T.I. and Young Jeezy, hustler's motivation every day, and it's like, how am I going to continue to be the face of Charlie and make money while all of these people are looking at me like I'm not quite a grieving widow? That, Who leaked this video too?
I can't wait for the Zoom call with Erica. Yeah, I can't believe she's doing it just 6 days after Charlie, but she'll probably...
Like, can we just go back to something? My whole thing is this. Yeah, everybody grieves differently. But I think what's really weird to me is like Charlie Kirk did not have cancer. Like Charlie Kirk and rip to James Vanderbeek, right? I love me some Dawson's Creek. I think when you look at an organically good person, good soul person, he seemed like he was an organically good person. He did not let Hollywood eat him up. And, he posted this video. Obviously, it was a little bit before he passed away. And he was just talking about how he got meaning in life, right? That guy did it right, but he passed away of cancer. And you would think the way that Erica has just essentially moved on, right? She's not grieving, all of that fake tear shit. I guess she was like, let me just stop that because people were clocking it, right? But you would think that Charlie had cancer, right? If Charlie had cancer, he was battling it for years, right? You know, I could kind of see this. You know what I mean? I could see her like it was expected, right? He fought a good fight, but he was brutally assassinated in front of everybody. In front of the world. You know what I mean? He was murdered. He was murdered, he was assassinated in front of everybody. And what I just don't understand is how that could not be traumatizing to her. That alone, like, I mean, I'm not sure if she saw the video at some point, whatever the case is, I would be just devastated. I would be traumatized. And like I said, I don't think Erica Kirk owed anybody anything coming out, being visible, trying to be this face of Turning Point USA so quickly. She didn't owe anybody that. If anything, I really think it messed up her rollout to be the CEO. They were rushing everything with Turning Point, right? Charlie dies, right? And instead of letting the organization just chill, right? Have a moment, if there was an interim phase that needed to happen, in a duration of time, they should have did that. But they just came out swinging with Erica. It's almost as if Erica was the sacrificial lamb for Turning Point USA or whatever, because it's like Ben Shapiro couldn't do it because Candace Owens has been a thorn in a lot of their post Charlie Kirk assassination plans, right? It just seems like Candace Owens is calling so much stuff out that it's, to me, it's tarnishing the reputation of the organization, but it's not necessarily anything that she's doing. She's asking questions. She's investigating. I don't think that I wouldn't say anything, but I don't think a lot of stuff that she's doing is defamatory. I think it's in the lens of investigation. But in this investigation, Candace is definitely putting a microscope under these people that call themselves Charlie Kirk's friends, right? And a lot of people are like, how come so much money moved? And like, how come so much money stopped? Because Charlie was changing his position, people were threatening this and that. And then all of a sudden, when Charlie's out of the picture, right, all the money's coming back. Y'all making sick money off of merch. And what's crazy to me is this video was leaked. And this is Erica Kirk talking about Charlie's memorial. And this
Probably
is JP.
Just crying the whole time. Poor thing. Oh, she's on.
Oh, look at all the thumbs up. Look how cute that is. Sorry, it's just a little bit more informal than probably Charlie would be reacting. How sweet.
Surprisingly upbeat. Laughing a lot.
Sorry, you guys. I just wanted to say first and foremost, my heart obviously is broken for you guys.
For us. What about her? Did she know Charlie was her husband?
Turning Point USA
will continue like my husband always wanted, and it'll be bigger than ever. And we're going to honor him by doing that. We're going to stay humble.
Oh, yeah. Well, she's really focused on business.
We're going to work hard because that's what he would want. And we're going to just make it grow.
Just growing the business.
But he's here, and he's more alive than ever. And he is, he's going to guide us.
He's actually dead, and she's guiding us. What's going on here?
And I told Justin, it's going to be something where everything before September 10th, any email you were working on, any project you were working on, it's not that it's irrelevant now. It's just things have changed, obviously.
What? So
things have changed, right? My whole thing is this is not a grieving widow. They cannot brand her. She will go down in history as a woman that moved right the fuck on after her husband's assassination. That is what she's given to me. I have never seen a woman move on like this. And you got kids? First of all, I would be paranoid. I would be very paranoid. Just because they caught a shooter doesn't mean they caught all the ops that were involved in Charlie's shooting. From what I see, they only got one guy. That's the guy, and that's what they're going through. That was a coordinated hit. All right? And I don't understand why they're trying to play in our faces and act like that was not a coordinated hit job. Tyler Robinson, I don't think he was just that smart to do all of that because he was passionate about trans ideology. Get out of here with that. I can't stand these manipulators because they think they're so smart that everybody is stupid. It's like, no, y'all sound stupid as hell. Now you want to label everybody because they know how stupid y'all sound. And yeah, this Erica Kirk, and then Erica Kirk, I mean, again, I said this weeks ago. They need to shelf her. No, I said this a month ago. They need to shelf her because she's not making the organization look good in so many different ways. Because number one, you're not the traditional woman, Erica Kirk. You're a power hungry woman. You're demonstrating that you are a power hungry woman. You are demonstrating that you are a woman that don't necessarily fit that little trad wife ideology that they try to push over there, right? You are a woman, to me, that was standing behind a great man and you were jealous of his greatness. That's what I believe. It's like I look at Erica Kirk like Aisha Curry. There are some women who are jealous of their successful man. They're jealous of their successful man because everything that they tried to do to build greatness for themselves, it was a failure. Or it wasn't where it didn't get them to the level that they wanted, right? And the only way that they were able to achieve the limelight that they wanted is behind the success of their man. And a lot of women silently resent that because it's like he's successful and I'm not. But when you peel back the layers of these types of women, hey, before you met your dude, you was out there trying and failing and nothing really stick outside of all the connections that your parents gave you, right? Same way with Aisha Curry, right? She tried to be an actress. She tried to do all this stuff. And when that stuff failed for her, she went right back to Steph. He liked her the whole time. He wanted her the whole time. But she felt like she had options. And when she saw that her options were pretty much exhausted because she wasn't the person, the capable person that she envisioned herself would being, right? She went right back to him. And she married him and secured her future. But for Erica Kirk, I don't think she married Charlie Kirk to secure her future. I really think she was a big op. I really don't think that nothing about their whole relationship, the way that people are narrating it, it doesn't seem like that was just a coincidence. I don't even think Candace Owens' husband is, I personally think that Candace's husband is a handler. I really do. I think that Charlie had a handler. I think Candace has a handler. I don't think that there's any mistake that these people just showed up in their lives and they just fell head over heels in love with them and got married. You got to be a beta person to kind of be that naive. So I don't think that a lot of these people who are just showing up in some of these commentators' lives, I don't think that it's a mistake, right? I think that some of these people are being placed in those positions so that they can keep an eye on these people. You know what I mean? So we'll see. But Pam Bondi got a lot to answer for. Pam Bondi, you got a lot to answer for. I want to know if that picture is Pam Bondi, if it's legit, if it's AI. Was that a photo that they found in the Epstein files? Because if that photo is linked to Epstein and that is like Pam Bondi and Trump at an Epstein party, she needs to be completely recused, dismissed, and possibly even prosecuted or evaluated for usurping justice. Because that should have been something on the table immediately said if that photo of Bondi and Trump is at an Epstein party. She needs to be investigated. She needs to be investigated because to me that is obstruction of justice. And I've said this before. Epstein is not just this one guy. It's a RICO case. That's a whole RICO case. And we're not going to see a lot of that because there's too many people that they're trying to protect. But again, we will see. We will see how this plays out. But anyways, you said there's no foolish belief together faithful adherents will defend it to the death. Candace don't know scripture. Candace, she's a Catholic. And I don't expect for Catholics to know scripture. I expect for Catholics to know doctrine. Because doctrines and creeds, right? I don't really expect too much spiritual insight from Candace Owens because she's an indoctrinated Christian. Okay, you said not only been a year, you any surprises? What's going on, Brian? I see you. I'm sorry I wasn't looking at the chat there. What's going on? Satan comes only to steal, kill, destroy, but I, Jesus, come that you. Okay, but you know what's interesting about Christians that really almost irk me because they don't know the Bible so much is they think that Armageddon, is this peace on earth type of deal. Like, I really feel like they are like, Christ is coming to bring peace on earth. You know what I mean? But it's clear they don't understand what Revelation is saying, right? Before New Jerusalem, and not to be confused with that abomination that is on the earth today, but before New Jerusalem comes from heaven, meaning that there is a restoration that he saw in his vision that is happening. It's coming from heaven, meaning that it is divine, it is holy. None of that is happening until the judgments, right? We got trumpets and bowls of judgments that need to happen before New Jerusalem come. So the war on this earth is not to bring peace to it. It is to bring judgment on it, right? And I do recommend you all grab a copy of the Dead Sea Scrolls and, read the War Scroll. Read the War Scroll, right? You're going to see a lot of similar. One thing I like about the War Scroll is this is another writer's perspective of end time. He's not going into visions because this writer did not have access to John's vision. Remember, these are scribes, Hebrews who are isolated in Qumran, right? So they would not have had any of the Old Testament or the New Testament writings, right? Maybe their legacies or ancestors years later after Romans subdued that area, maybe they would have it. But these people in Qumran, they didn't have John's vision, right? We got to keep that in mind. They did not have John's vision. They didn't even probably, perhaps, if, I haven't read anything to suggest that Israelites or Hebrews or people in Israel, like Jerusalem or Galilee, if they were exchanging documents or not. But we got to kind of see, we kind of got to look at, now we're in Roman Empire territory. And so a lot of those apostles, they went out to evangelize. Many of them were executed for evangelizing because, again, you had those who called themselves Jews, and even the class of clergy who would be these Christian leaders at the time, they were killing those people, right? Because they wanted control over the faith. Because everyone knows that if you can control people, the faith, the beliefs of people, you can control them. But control was not the premise of the Hebrew faith. It wasn't. It was walk in the way of righteousness, right? Rely on your God and just be a good person. Don't screw people over. Don't make bad deals, right? Don't sell your soul. Don't sell your integrity. It is so not difficult to be a godly person on this earth. You just have to remove yourself and your gains. And, I was talking to, someone today, and, we got on the conversation about insider trading. And I'm a financial advisor. And I was telling him there were several times in my career where I had access to insider trading and I never acted on it. And I never acted on it because it contradicted my morality, knowing what I knew about insider trading, that it creates an unfair market advantage for those who think that the market is free and fair. And so, and he's like, yeah, because, he was just joking, like, yeah, I'm not in a big company. I don't know any insider trading stuff. And, we kind of just had that conversation. I said, even if I did, I wouldn't act on it. Right? Because the more you can operate with integrity, the more godly of a person that you are, to me, you'll be, the more favorable to God that you will be. So, last thought, I'm going to let James Vanderbeek take it home. And obviously, what he is saying, it can apply to, anybody in life, anybody in life. But, I think that, this is the message of a dying man. And, I think it's just an important message for a lot of people.
To share something.
Personally inappropriate are held for review. Got it.
When I was younger, I used
inappropriate message
to define myself as an actor, right?
So,
which was never really all that. To share something that I learned with y'all.
And this is
when
James
I was younger, I used to
Vanderbeek.
define myself as an actor, right? Which was never really all that fulfilling. And then I became a husband, and that was much better. And then I became a father, and that was the ultimate. I could define myself then as a loving capable, strong, supportive husband, father, provider, steward of the land that we're so lucky to live on. And for a long time, that felt like a really good definition to the question, who am I? What am I? And then this year, I had to look my own mortality in the eye. I had to come nose to nose with death. And all of those definitions that I cared so deeply about were stripped from me. I was away for treatment, so I could no longer be a husband that was helpful to my wife. I could no longer be a father who could pick up his kids and put them to bed and be there for them. I could not be a provider because I wasn't working. I couldn't even be a steward of the land because at times I was too weak to prune all the trees during the window that you're supposed to prune them. And so I was faced with the question, if I am just a too skinny, weak guy alone in an apartment with cancer, what am I? And I meditated and the answer came through. I am worthy of God's love simply because I exist. And if I'm worthy of God's love, shouldn't I also be worthy of my own? And the same is true for you.
And he was worthy of God's love not just because he existed, it was how he existed. When you look at listen to the things that he said, right? And he said, he never defined himself as an actor, right? His greatest definitions were father, husband, steward of the land. And when you think of the Most High and really what he wants for us, right? What he really intended for us, it was really that. It was really that, right? Build legacies, you know, till build your land, right? Enjoy the fruits of your labor. Respect other people. Stay in your lane. Honor your father and your mother, right? Be obedient to your children. It's such a there's nothing complicated about godly standards. I think people make it complicated, but I love when people like this, and it's sad that some people actually have to see death to come to this revelation that he did, right? But I think if James Vanderbeek, you know, I feel like in retrospect, people like him, you know, God's love was always manifested. And I think sometimes for people with faith, we see God's love by just the strength that we have to get through things, right? And just understanding that, even though this guy passed away, right? I feel like leaving this world knowing that you're favored by God and you're not questioning it, you're not sure, you're not, that you're firmly established that that God loves you. I think that that is like the best way to leave this earth. So rest in peace, James Vanderbeek. I was a huge Dawson's Creek fan, even though I was in love with Pacey. Right? What's the other guy? What's his name? What's the other kid's name? I forget his name. Dawson was cute too, though. James Vanderbeek was a very handsome man. Beautiful kids. I think he had 6 beautiful kids, a beautiful wife. He had a gorgeous family. And I pray for those people because they did lose, such an awesome rock in their family. So, anyways, you guys, have a wonderful rest of your day. Let me know what you think about Pam Bondi. Let me know what you think about the idea of people tracing their ancestry using, back to ancient times, using, obviously the table of nations in the Bible in Genesis, but also establishing what those people ended up looking like in antiquities, right? looking at some of those reoccurring patterns. So when I look at people in Nigeria, some of those people, especially those tied to Benin, I go back and I look at the ancient Nubians, and I can say, you know what? Those are Hamites. And because Ham's descendants pretty much stay constant in some of their facial features, you can trace a lot of Ham's descendants back to their ancient times. So I think that if those Edo people were to trace their ancestry back, I think that they would, you know, beyond Edos, right? I think that they will find themselves in ancient Nubia. And so look at those artifacts, look at how the ancient Edo people um, depicted themselves, and look at how the ancient Nubians depicted themselves, and you'll start to see these patterns that I'm talking about. And like I said, check out my post on YouTube. Just go to the channel and the post tab, and you'll see. I even gave an example of a modern descendant to show that the patterns do not lie. So, modern geneticists, you are protecting Canaanites. You don't want to tell the truth. And a lot of this ambiguous deciphering, you guys know what it is, right? And there's no need to protect people anymore, because I think we have enough information out there to kind of connect the dots ourselves. But, anyways, you guys have a wonderful rest of your evening. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you not disrespect or abuse yourself, do not disrespect or abuse your neighbors. Bye.